The kingdom of Dracoria lived under the shadow of its Alpha King. Feared, adored, and untouchable, King Cailan was a man whose very presence commanded silence. The laws he enforced were as brutal as the iron that clamped the wrists of traitors. His trials, merciless ordeals designed to test strength, cunning, and endurance, were dreaded by all. And of all the horrors within his reign, none were darker than the infamous Alpha King's trial. It was said no woman survived it. None. They either died within the labyrinth of fire and steel or were cast out broken, their spirit shattered. The trial was designed for warriors, alphas bred to dominate and rule, not delicate omegas who were seen as weak and submissive. And yet, tradition dictated that once in a generation, women chosen by fate would be sent before the king, tested to see if any could stand as his equal. For centuries, the answer had been the same: none. But fate has a way of weaving its threads where no one expects. Alara stood in the rain the night her world ended. She was not chosen by fate, not selected by noble birth, and certainly not one of the proud alphas who strutted through the kingdom. She was a rejected omega, tossed aside by her mate, branded as worthless. Omegas were already seen as fragile, needing protection, but a rejected one. That was worse than being invisible. Her mate, Lucian, had marked her in a bond that was supposed to last for life. But when he rose in rank and found ambition far more alluring than love, he tore the bond from her with words that cut deeper than claws. You are nothing, Alara. Nothing but a burden. She had fallen to her knees, clutching her chest as the bond snapped, pain searing through her. In that moment, something inside her hardened. The days that followed were filled with whispers and sneers. A rejected omega was considered tainted, unworthy of Pax, unworthy of love, unworthy of life itself. And so, when soldiers came to her village, demanding names of women to face the Alpha King's trial, it was no surprise when her name was offered. Not out of honor, out of cruelty. Let the weak one die for us, her people muttered. And so Alara was taken, dragged to the capital, and thrown into a cell with nothing but the echo of her mate's rejection in her heart. The day of the trial dawned blood red. The chamber was vast, its walls lined with spectators, nobles, warriors, courtiers, and those eager to see another woman fail. At the far end, upon a throne carved of black stone, sat King Cailan. His golden eyes glowed like embers beneath his crown of iron, his presence a storm that silenced the hall. Alara's heart pounded as she was shoved forward. She expected laughter, scorn, even disgust. What she did not expect was the king's gaze to lock on her like a predator scenting something new. A murmur rippled through the court. A rejected omega. They've sent him scraps now. Cailan lifted a hand, and silence fell. His voice was deep, resonant, unyielding. You dare stand before me, omega? Alara's lips trembled, but she forced words out. I did not choose to stand here, my king. But I will not fall without a fight. Gasps, whispers. No omega spoke so boldly to the king. For a flicker of a moment, Cailan's lips curved. Not in mockery, in intrigue. Very well, he said. Let the trial begin. The trial was no simple contest. It was a gauntlet forged from nightmares. First came the maze of blades. Walls shifted, traps sprung from shadows, and blades swung from chains with lethal precision. Alphas before her had perished within its twisting paths. Alara entered with nothing but her instincts. She remembered Lucian's rejection, the way her village spat her name like poison, the hollow ache of being unwanted. Every step was fueled by defiance. She ducked under swinging steel, pressed herself flat against stone walls, and when fire erupted along the path, she leapt through the flames, her skin searing but her resolve unbroken. When she emerged, battered but alive, the hall gasped. Cailan leaned forward on his throne, his golden eyes blazing with something unreadable. The second trial was worse. The pit of beasts. A gate opened, and monstrous wolves, bred for war, lunged at her. Their fangs glistened, their howls filled the chamber. Alara's heart thudded. She had no weapon, no claws to match theirs. But she had cunning. When the first wolf lunged, she dropped to her knees, rolling beneath its snapping jaws. She seized a broken chain from the ground, wrapping it around her arm. Another wolf lunged, and she swung the chain, striking its muzzle. She fought not with brute strength but with agility, weaving between their strikes, turning their weight against them. By the time the last beast lay growling in submission, the hall was silent. She stood in the center, chest heaving, chain clutched in her burned hands. For the first time in history, a woman had endured this far. The third trial was the trial of will. She was chained before the king himself, forced to endure his presence, his power pressing against her like crushing stone. Alphys had bowed, broken, begged under the weight of his aura. But Alara lifted her chin. The bond she once had with Lucian had nearly destroyed her. She had already been broken and reforged in pain. What was one more weight pressing on her? Her knees trembled, her bones screamed, but she refused to bow. She looked Kaelan directly in the eye, and to the shock of all, he looked away first. The hall erupted in chaos. Impossible. She is nothing but an Omega. Witchcraft. But Kaelan rose to his feet, his voice thunderous. Silence. The hall obeyed. He descended from his throne, his steps slow, deliberate, his gaze never leaving Alara. When he stood before her, towering, his aura a storm pressing against her skin, he reached out and lifted her chin with a single finger. In all my reign, he said, his voice low enough for only her to hear, none have endured. You should have broken 1,000 times over. Yet here you stand. Why? Her voice cracked, but her words were steel. Because I have nothing left to lose. Kaelan studied her, and in his eyes was not cruelty, not disdain, but something far more dangerous, respect. Days passed, and Alara remained in the palace. The king had not dismissed her, nor had he claimed her victory false. Instead, he watched, he tested, he spoke with her in quiet chambers where no courtiers dared intrude. He saw her strength was not in claws or brute force, but in a will that refused to bend. She challenged him in words where others bowed. She met his gaze when others trembled. And slowly, dangerously, something began to shift. The Alpha King who trusted no one, who saw women as fragile vessels, began to see her not as an Omega, not as a rejected outcast, but as something he had never encountered, an equal. But kingdoms are not built on equality. Whispers turned to threats, nobles plotted in shadows, warriors sneered that the king had gone soft. And Lucian, her former mate, returned, seething with rage at the sight of the woman he had rejected standing beside the king. She is nothing. Lucian spat in the great hall, daring to challenge Kaelan. She is mine, once mine, and she will always be worthless. The court held its breath. Alara stepped forward before Kaelan could rise. Her voice rang clear. I was yours, once. But you were too blind to see my worth. And now you will see me burn brighter than your ambition ever could. The hall erupted, not in laughter, but in shock. For the first time, a rejected Omega had not only survived, she had defied her past, her king, and the very laws of their world. War followed. Betrayals bled into battles, and Alara stood beside Kaelan through it all. Where he wielded steel, she wielded fire of spirit. Where he commanded armies, she commanded hearts. Together, they tore through enemies who thought them mismatched. Together, they forged something greater than tradition, greater than law. And when the dust settled, when the final traitor was silenced, Kaelan crowned her not only as his mate but as his queen. The Omega who was once rejected, once unwanted, now ruled beside the fiercest king Dracoria had ever known. Her name became legend. Alara, the Omega who defied fate.